Jexie here. Welcome back to another video. So today's video, I thought I'd talk about something that may be a little bit controversial, but I want to give my opinion on it anyway. And that topic is whether or not marijuana is a gateway drug. So first off, I want to apologize for my chaotic background. My daughter's cat yesterday had stomach issues all over her bed, and so she had to sleep up here last night. Hopefully we get all those blankets finished washing today, and then this will be cleaned up. So I apologize for that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about whether or not marijuana is a gateway drug. I know there are a lot of opinions about this, and I think my opinion is a little bit different than it is or it isn't. I kind of agree that it is, but feel like in a different way. And I'll explain. So I first want to say that if you think about what I'm going to say in a different way, I would love to hear your thoughts. Leave it in the comments. Let's have a discussion about this. I think the only way we can really learn about these topics is if we have real discussion about them. So a lot of people argue that, marijuana, it comes along with should it be legalized for medicinal? Should it be legalized for recreational? If we legalize it, will that make kids more likely to use other drugs because marijuana is already a gateway drug? What does that mean? A gateway drug means that, if you use marijuana, you're now more likely to use other drugs, okay? So I'm going to cover all of that in a very simple way. One, I 100% believe that marijuana should be legalized both for medicinal purposes and for recreational purposes. I know, crazy opinion for a drug addict, right? But hear me out. Right now, we are seeing the worst opioid crisis around the globe. And a lot of people who have become addicted to opiates have done so because they've been prescribed pain medication by their doctors. Pain medication has been shown in lots of studies not to be good for long-term chronic pain patients because of the addictive effects that it has. Now, a lot of people are able to take pain medication for long-term successfully and have no problems with it. For those people, I think that's great, and I don't want to obviously say, you can't take that med. If it's working for you, it's working for you. But I have seen a lot of people who have become addicted and needed more. For most opiates, your body builds up a tolerance. And I lived with a non-addict who had to take long-term pain medication for war injuries. So I do have an understanding of people who come from that background, because I know a lot of times when we talk about opioid pain medication, people who take it for pain have a very strong opinion that is different from a lot of other people, right? So I recognize that, and I also want to say that I do have experience there, right? I am personally not a pain patient, never had. I've never really been, except for maybe getting a tooth pulled or something, experience any kind of pain that would require medication. But my ex-husband, as I said, had war injuries. He was in and out of hospitals for years. We actually lived in a hospital at Walter Reed for about 18 months. And he had to take chronic pain medication. It eventually did lead to his demise in causing permanent damage, but that's also because of overprescribing, which is a totally another issue. But I just say that because I want to make sure that I don't get people angry in the comments well, what about pain patients who are successful with opiates? I'm not talking about you. But a lot of people who become addicted and become heroin users or die from fentanyl overdoses started because they were prescribed opiates for pain. Now, there are I don't want to say tons of studies, because unfortunately, because marijuana has been illegal for so long, there are not as many studies as there could be. However, the studies that there are show that marijuana is actually a really good substitute for opioid pain medication. Marijuana has pain-killing properties, right? And I 100% think that prescribing somebody marijuana for chronic pain is safer overall, both in the short term and the long term, than prescribing opioid pain medication. Okay, so that's why I think it should be legal medicinally. We can argue semantics and for what things it should be legalized for in that area, but for the most part, I think it's always going to be a better option than pain medications. The second thing is in regards to recreation. I personally don't see it being a problem. When we think about recreational use for something, we have to think about it along with what it would be close to, right? So let's look at marijuana compared to alcohol, because right now alcohol is really the only type of recreational mind-altering substances that's out there that is just as commonly used as some other types of drugs, right? And I would argue, and statistics can prove it, and if you don't believe me, tell me, I'll find stuff and I'll give you written evidence. But marijuana is safer than alcohol. There are less deaths from marijuana than there are to alcohol. There are less addiction issues to marijuana than there are to alcohol. And I think that if we are okay as a society having alcohol legal, I don't understand why we're still talking about whether marijuana should be illegal or not. The only reason it became illegal to begin with had to do with something with the hemp being a competition for ropes, right? Like, it was not made illegal because it was harmful. It was made illegal because, you know, there was competition for rope making. At least that's my understanding. But anyway, I do think if you make it legal, it needs to be regulated and all that other stuff, just like, you know, just like it is with alcohol. If you drive when you smoke, like, that's a problem, right? Okay. So I wanted to say that, although it's not directly related to the topic, I wanted to make sure you understood, like, my feelings on where I am with marijuana before I talk about whether or not it's a gateway drug. So, is marijuana a gateway drug? I would say 100% yes, but not because of what it is. I think marijuana has become a gateway drug because of how we teach children about drugs, okay? So, children get exposed to drug education starting in elementary school, usually 4th or 5th grade, when they go through the d.a.r.e program or some other type of lesson in their health class or whatever. But it's usually about 4th or 5th grade where the topic of drugs comes into regular conversation. So both my kids have been through that type of education, and so I've seen, like, what they teach and also remember a bit from when I was in school myself. So one of the things we do is we tend to separate alcohol and all other drugs, including marijuana, right? And we talk about the dangers of alcohol, but we teach it differently. And consider this. Most kids have families, let's say, who have a glass of wine, who drink a beer off the Super Bowl, right? Even if they're not big drinkers, a lot of kids are exposed to adults consuming alcohol on some type of basis, right? So we can't tell kids that alcohol is awful and anybody who drinks alcohol is a bad person, right? Because how do they reconcile that information with their home lives, with their families, with weddings, with events, right? So we tend to say that alcohol is okay as long as you are of age and that you drink responsibly, right? That's the message we give about alcohol, that you can do it when you're an adult if you're responsible, okay? And then we get to marijuana and other drugs. They are grouped together as a never, always a problem. You know, they can cause you to die. They can cause all these different medical issues. Don't ever, ever do them. And to me, that's the same problem that we have with abstinence-based sex education, right? If it is shown that by teaching abstinence instead of safe sex, you end up with more teen pregnancies, more STDs, right? Safe sex is the better way to teach as opposed to just saying don't have sex, right? And I think the same thing applies to drugs. Instead of saying don't do any drugs, I think we need to recognize that marijuana is not as deadly and as dangerous as these other drugs, right? So if a kid, and this is why my views on how it's a gateway drug, right? If you're told that everything, you know, alcohol, as long as you're an adult and you do it responsibly, it's okay, right? But all of these other things are super dangerous. And I smoke a joint with my friends at, you know, teenage years. And the worst thing that happens to me is I get really giggly, I eat a bunch of Doritos, and, you know, maybe get a little paranoid and then take a nap, right? My view on all drugs now is going to be they're kind of fun, and they're definitely not dangerous. And that is why marijuana has become a gateway drug. We need to pull marijuana out from this all drugs category. And we need to talk about it separately, just like we talk about alcohol separately. We need to talk about alcohol as drink responsible, of age, and share the dangers. We need to talk about marijuana as the being responsible end of dangers. And then you could talk about all other drugs. But when you're grouping in conversation to children marijuana with harder drugs like cocaine and heroin, they're viewing them all in the same kind of way. So the first drug that most kids have access to is marijuana. So when you experience its effects, and it's not scary, and you don't feel like you have been in any danger, and you don't feel bad the next day, and all these things, you are so much more susceptible to trying other drugs, because as far as you know, they're all the same level of dangerous. We need to be more honest with kids. When I talk to my kids about drugs, I'm honest about it. You really shouldn't smoke marijuana. It does have these negative effects. You definitely shouldn't be smoking it before you're 18 at least, right? Depending on if it's legalized and where you live or not. But let me tell you this, these other drugs can cause people to overdose and die. These drugs need to be kept far, far away, right? Kids experiment, kids do stuff, right? We all did. And I want to hope that my children never touch drugs, never smoke pot, never go out and get wasted, right? But I'm being unrealistic if I think that way. And I'm going to come across the same problems you come across when you teach abstinence-based sex education. If you're going to just say, don't do it, you don't teach signs of overdosing. You don't teach signs of somebody having a bad reaction to something. You don't teach the individual dangers with different drugs. For example, taking ecstasy and going to a club sounds like a great time until you know that dehydration can cause a huge problem, right? If we taught kids about the actual dangers of drugs and stop making marijuana sound like it's this awful, deadly drug like the equivalent to heroin, I don't think marijuana would be a gateway drug. I think you'd have just as... I don't want to say we should tell our kids, like, hey, go smoke pot, everything's great. Like, no. We need to teach them the same way we do about alcohol, right? But it needs to be moved along. Because if kids think that marijuana and pain pills, which both generally are easily accessible to younger kids, if we teach them that smoking a joint and taking pain medication is equal, we're setting our kids up for failure. They need to understand that that pain medication in their parents' medicine cabinet is a heck of a lot more dangerous to them than smoking a joint with their friends. I'm just being honest. And I think we don't want to glorify drugs. We don't want to make drugs appealing to kids, right? So we do this thing where we're like, don't do it, everything's bad. If we just gave real information, then we can allow our kids to make choices for themselves. Choices based on education. It's the same thing with sex, right? If we give kids choices and we tell kids about the dangers of having unprotected sex, if we explain how a woman becomes pregnant, if we let them know about the social and emotional impact having sex for the first time can have, we're letting them make stronger choices. But if you just say don't have sex until you're married, we're not giving them any information. And I think we need to view drug education in that same way. We need to really give kids information, real information, and allow them to make good choices. Just say no doesn't mean anything. I mean, did it mean anything to you? Because I know for me, just say no to drugs. I just assumed they all were fine. It wasn't until I was much older, having experimented with lots of things, that I had any real understanding of the danger I put myself in. I think kids need to be aware of that danger in a realistic way so that they believe you. Because if you tell kids that marijuana is just as dangerous as heroin, and they smoke marijuana and realize it's not that bad, they're never going to believe you when you tell them that sticking a needle in their arm is deadly. I think we need to save lives here. So let's be honest. So anyway, sorry if I got a little excited. that's my opinion on that. If you have a different opinion, please, I would love to hear it. Let's have a conversation about this, because I think the more we talk about issues like this, the more we can strive to change and help kids as they're growing up to not become drug addicts. Because I'll tell you right now, almost every drug addict I know would wish they could go back and not become addicted, right? So, I don't know, let's talk about it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps a lot. If you're not subscribed already, welcome. Please subscribe to my channel. We're growing so big. I can't believe we're over 500 subscribers. That's amazing to me. And to think it's been less than a year of having a channel. So anyway, thank you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you at Trivia Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I hope you all have a great day. Bye, guys.